There is a moment softer than sleep and quieter than breath that greets you before the world remembers your name. It arrives just before your first thought, when your body stirs, but your mind hasn't yet opened its eyes. In that fragile space, that single unclaimed breath, you are untouched. Not by worry, not by memory, not even by identity. You haven't remembered what you're supposed to fix. You haven't reached for who you're expected to be. You simply are. And there's something holy about that. Not in a dramatic spiritual way, but in a deeply human one. It's a moment that whispers, not shouts. A window that opens just for a heartbeat before your old thoughts come to collect you. Before habit takes your hand and says, "Come, we have pain to rehearse." Because almost without fail, that's what happens. You reach, not outward, not upward, but backward. You remember the thing you didn't finish, the silence someone left you in, the weight that has grown so familiar it wears your name now. And suddenly, you're not in this morning anymore. You're in yesterday, last year, that one conversation, that ache that never needed an invitation to return. And all of it came rushing in through focus. Not focus like ambition or discipline, but focus as in direction. The quiet compass of your attention. The place your thoughts return to when you are not steering. I used to think I was tired because I worked too hard. But I wasn't tired from doing. I was tired from circling, from waking each day and orbiting the same small ache like a sun that would never rise. I didn't know I was allowed to begin again. Not by fixing anything, just by choosing a softer gaze. You see, your first thought is the soil, the one where your day begins to grow. And if you plant regret or fear or lack, don't be surprised when the hours ahead echo the tone of that root. But here's the quiet miracle. You don't have to follow that first thought. You can pause. You can stay in that breath before remembering. And in that pause, you can plant something gentler. You can ask, what if I don't rush to define myself today by what I've lost? What if I just begin? No phone, no pressure, no story. Just this breath, this sky, this self before the world names you again. Because your healing won't start with what you fix. It will start with what you feed. In this moment, this sacred pause before thought is where you choose the meal. Pain doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers your name like an old friend. Sometimes it feels like home, not because it's safe, but because you know where all the walls are. We talk so much about letting go, but no one tells you how hard it is to release the thing that shaped you. Even if it was sharp, even if it was cruel, even if it's still bleeding, there's a strange comfort in pain we've memorized. You don't have to think. You don't have to risk. You just follow the path you've always walked. Eyes half closed, heart half numb. I once met someone who could recite the exact moment her life changed, and not in a good way. A single year, a single betrayal, a sentence she had repeated so often it had become scripture. She didn't speak it with sadness anymore, but with reverence, like it was her name. And maybe, in some way, it had become that. But what she couldn't see was this. Her story had frozen her in time. She wasn't healing. She was rehearsing. And maybe that's what so many of us are doing. Not recovering, but reciting. We wear our wounds like badges because we think they keep us safe. We say, this is just who I am, when what we mean is this is what I had to become. But you are not your survival mode. You are not the pattern you adopted when love left the room. You are not the reaction that protected you once, but now just keeps you small. It's not your fault if you stayed in the pain too long. The mind loves repetition. And if the only rhythm it knows is ache, it will dance to it, even if it leaves you bruised. So if you find yourself waking up and reaching for sadness like it's a coat you've always worn, don't hate yourself for it. Don't shame the reflex. Just notice it. Notice that your grief has become a language, and you've become fluent. But also know, this languages can be unlearned. Reflexes can be retrained. Not through force, but through awareness. Ask gently, am I still holding this because it's healing me? Or because it's the only thing I know how to hold? Because the truth is, you don't need to hate the pain to stop living inside it. You just need to realize you're allowed to build a life outside the room where it first entered you. Your mind is not a camera. It doesn't record everything. It filters. It edits. And it keeps only what it believes is important. But here's the twist. What your mind believes is important is often just what it already agrees with. If you carry the belief that people leave, you will notice every silence, every shift, every slow reply. If you fear you're not enough, you will hear critique where there is none. You will scan faces for disappointment. You will overlook the ones who stayed because you've trained your eyes to look for the ones who walked away. Focus is a filter, and most of us don't know we've been wearing the same lens for years. I remember sitting across from someone I loved, watching their face light up as they spoke, and still my mind searched their tone for what they weren't saying. I wasn't hearing them. I was hearing the echo of every voice that ever told me I wasn't worth staying for. It wasn't about them. It was about what I had been conditioned to focus on. And this is where we quietly lose ourselves. Not in tragedy, but in pattern. The repetition of scanning for threat. The instinct to find the flaw. The habit of proving our pain was valid by recreating it. Because when your focus has been shaped by survival, even peace feels suspicious. Even love feels like a test you might fail. But it doesn't mean the world is cruel. It means your lens is cracked, and the cracks are coloring the light. You're not seeing clearly. You're seeing predictably. And that's the real danger of unconscious focus. It doesn't just bring pain into view. It filters out everything else. You miss the compliment. You miss the moment of kindness. You miss your own progress because you were busy bracing for something to go wrong. And what gets filtered out gets forgotten. But here's the quiet revolution. You can adjust the lens. Not with delusion, not with fake positivity, but with the courage to ask what else might be here right now that I haven't let myself see. The beauty, the effort, the quiet ways life is still offering you softness. The world hasn't changed, but your gaze can. And when it does, you begin to notice life again, not just the fear of it. Focus isn't just about what you chase. It's about what you return to again and again, even when you're not trying to. It's the gravity pulling your thoughts back to the same storyline, the same fear, the same version of yourself you stopped believing in, but never stopped rehearsing. And over time, it doesn't feel like focus anymore. It starts to feel like identity. You wake up not thinking, what do I want to create? But what's wrong with me today? You walk through life, not asking, What could go right? But how long before this falls apart? And before you even realize it, your focus has been building the house you now live in, room by room, belief by belief. Not the house you wanted, but the one that feels familiar. I once heard someone say, "I don't know how to think differently." They weren't being lazy. They were being honest. When your focus has been trained by pain, you don't even realize it's a choice anymore. It feels like the truth, but it's not. It's just repetition. And repetition doesn't make something true. It just makes it automatic. It's like driving the same road every day. You forget you can turn. You forget you can stop. You forget there were ever other roads. And maybe the saddest part is this. You begin to protect the pain. You defend the story. You start to say things like, "That's just who I am," when maybe that's just who you've become under the weight of who you had to be. But you are not your coping mechanisms. You are not the thoughts you inherited. You are not the loops your brain keeps circling because it hasn't been shown another way. Focus is not just a tool, it's a mirror. And the more often you stare into it, the more it tells you who you are. So the real question is not what am I trying to achieve, but rather, what am I building with my attention? Because even if you never speak it out loud, your focus is creating the architecture of your being, not through force, but through return. And the version of you that keeps growing, it's the one you keep looking at. Not every thought is an invitation. Not every fear needs a seat at your table. Some thoughts are just echoes, not truths, not signals, not signs, just noise. But we weren't taught that, were we? We were taught to analyze, to dig, to find the why in every silence, to solve every discomfort as if it were a puzzle with a meaningful answer. But what if it's not? What if some thoughts are just leftover static background hum from an old version of you, one who didn't yet know how to let things pass without holding them? I once watched a friend spiral for days after someone didn't respond to her message. She created entire stories in her mind. Was it something she said? Was it how she said it? Did she come off too strong or not strong enough? By the time the message came days later, it turned out the other person had simply been overwhelmed, not unkind. Life had moved, but she had stayed, not in the present, but in the loop. That's the cost of overfocus. It gives small things gravity they were never meant to hold. It reopens wounds that could have closed if we just didn't pick at them so much. But we confuse thinking with healing. As if we just think harder, dig deeper, spin faster, we'll find the peace we're chasing. But peace doesn't come from spinning. It comes from stillness. And that stillness doesn't require you to fix the thought. It just asks you not to feed it. Let the spiral starve. Let it unravel without your attention. Let it pass by like a train you don't board. You can feel the pull, but not follow it. There is power in saying, "I don't need to understand this to let it go." There is freedom in choosing silence over strategy. Because healing doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's a quiet refusal, a gentle turning away, a decision not to give your energy to something that only drains you. That doesn't make you careless. It makes you clean. You are allowed to stop explaining your pain to yourself. You are allowed to stop turning it over like a stone in your palm, looking for angles that were never meant to fit together. Not every thought is sacred. Not every feeling is a doorway. Some are just wind. and your job is simply to leave the window open long enough for them to pass. Change doesn't always look like change. Sometimes it looks like boredom, repetition, a small redirection that feels so subtle you question if it matters at all. But that's how the mind rewrites its story, not with fireworks, but with rhythm. I once had a friend who carried an argument with her father in her chest like a stone. He had passed years before, but his voice still echoed in her mind, not with cruelty, but with conflict, unfinished, unresolved. Every week, she'd revisit that moment, the last conversation, the silence between them. She'd trace every word, every breath, trying to find something that would let her forgive him, or maybe forgive herself. Then one day, something shifted. She didn't plan it. She just got tired of remembering the pain. And instead of replaying what hurt, she remembered his laugh. Just once. But that one moment was a seed. And like all seeds, it didn't bloom instantly, but it settled in. And each time the old story returned, she reached for that one lighter memory instead. It didn't erase the ache, but it softened its edge. And over time, the loop changed, not by force, not by pretending nothing happened, but by introducing something new, something kinder. That's how healing begins, with the smallest shift in gaze, not because the old isn't true, but because it's no longer all that's true. You can remember what happened without devoting your whole identity to it. You can carry the scar without living inside the wound. And the more you return to something lighter, even if it feels awkward or artificial, even if your nervous system protests, the more familiar it becomes. Because the brain doesn't crave truth, it craves repetition. And if you show it peace, show it softness, show it safety again and again, it will learn. It will stop bracing, it will stop rehearsing harm, and slowly, it will trust the new rhythm. Not perfectly, but enough. Enough for your chest to loosen. Enough for your breath to deepen. Enough for the morning to arrive without being haunted by the night before. So no healing won't always look dramatic. It may never earn applause. But it will feel like silence where there used to be noise. Stillness where there used to be spiraling. And one day, you'll realize you're not reacting like you used to. You're not circling that same pain. You're not waiting for what already passed. You're here, present, rooted, lighter. And not because everything is different, but because your focus finally is. Focus isn't just about clarity. It's about devotion. It's the invisible thread tying your life together. What you notice, what you repeat, what you quietly worship without even meaning to. Because every time you return to a thought, you give it breath. Every time you react to the same fear, you kneel to it again. Not in surrender, but in familiarity. And where your energy returns becomes your temple. I didn't understand this for a long time. I thought healing was something I had to force, that I needed more tools, more insight, more control. But the deeper truth, I wasn't broken. I was just scattered. I had given away my focus to things that didn't love me back, to stories that didn't belong to me, to people who had long since stopped listening, but whose echoes I still answered to. No wonder I couldn't feel whole. My attention was bleeding in 1,000 directions. My soul was always explaining itself to memories, to doubts, to invisible expectations. But stillness taught me something the world never did, that not everything deserves my gaze. That peace doesn't come from doing more, but from choosing less. So now I ask myself, not what I want to achieve, but what I want to return to. What kind of inner home am I building brick by brick with my focus? Is it made of fear, of what ifs and old voices? Or is it something gentler? Some days, I still catch myself spiraling, still reaching for stories that no longer serve me. But I've learned that noticing is enough. That noticing is the first act of re-choosing. You don't have to fight the thought. You don't have to fix it. You just have to decide it's no longer worthy of your return. And in that moment, you come back to yourself. Not with fanfare, not with certainty, but with a whisper that says, this is sacred. This breath, this moment, this version of you unguarded, unburdened. Let that be where you begin again. Not with effort, but with reverence. Because your attention is not just what you see, it's what you offer. It's what you make room for. And when you offer it gently, to silence, to grace, to the softness beneath the noise, you don't just find healing. You remember you were never separate from it. You were just looking elsewhere.